Ivanka Trump in a major West Wing role? Nope, not happening. Straight from the source.
People think that you're going to be part of the administration, Ivanka.
I'm going to be a daughter, but I've said throughout the campaign that I'm very passionate about certain issues and that I want to fight for them. So, there are a lot of things that I feel deeply strongly about, but not in a formal administrative capacity.
Well, consider that no longer operative. The president's daughter is working in a West Wing office. After weeks of ethics questions, she announced yesterday she will take the title assistant to the president. And while not taking a salary, she will be subject to the same disclosure and ethics rules of other White House employees. What to make of this?
Well, I think that she probably, from what I hear, she wanted to keep that promise of not having a formal role, but realized that the ethics issues probably superseded that desire. And everything that they have done up until this point has indicated that she's going to be sitting in on meetings with world leaders, sitting next to German Prime Minister Angela Merkel, going to a theater production with the Canadian Prime Minister. She's there, she's involved, and she's involved clearly because her father wants her to be, and because she wants to be. But we still don't know what she's aiming at. We don't know what Ivanka wants and how exactly she's pushing for her issues because we haven't really seen them move forward yet.
Right. Is this a lot of the people who've been complaining about the family being in the White House, the ethics people? Is it transparent? Is it nepotism? How can you do this? Is this a victory for them or a defeat for them? Here's what she said in her statement yesterday announcing this. I've heard the concerns some have with my advising the president in my personal capacity while voluntarily complying with all ethics rules, and I will instead serve as an unpaid employee in the White House office subject to all of the same rules as other federal employees. Throughout this process, I've been working closely and in good faith with the White House counsel and my personal counsel to address the unprecedented nature of my role. There have been dust-ups over Kellyanne Conway going into the briefing room and promoting, Ivanka's products, and Kellyanne Conway got sort of sanctioned for that a little bit, mini-sanctioned for that. But in this case now she is saying, I will be more transparent, right?
Yeah, I like this step for her because, I think she's probably taking on a role of a fairly active first lady or a fairly active grown first daughter, as perhaps Chelsea Clinton might have been in a similar situation at times. To clarify that, I think is important. The ethics part is important. She will be subject to some specific rules, and I think perhaps less than Kellyanne or President Trump, she is invested in making that look good because that's part of her public persona. I like having her in those rooms because she has influence on her father, and she seems like somebody who is interested in those appearances.
It's interesting. He is not someone who has a long political career, obviously, and someone and thus has advisors whose only brief is him. You've got Reince Priebus, who's essentially, and Mike Pence, who are kind of the liaison to the traditional Republican Party. You've got Steve Bannon, who is the kind of the architect of this vision of a transformed, ethnic defensive nationalist politics. And then you've got Jared and Ivanka, whose client is the president, kind of the way Michael Deaver was between an ideological Ed Meese and a pragmatic Jim Baker for Ronald Reagan. He doesn't have somebody else to be in that role. And on balance, if you have someone playing this role sort of in a semi-official way, outside or inside, you're probably better off. The question I have, is the influence going to be there that people assume? One area that she talked about a lot during the campaign, after the campaign, brokered the meeting between Al Gore and Donald Trump. This week, he repealed the Clean Power Plan. He started the process of repealing the Clean Power Plan, one of President Obama's most important second-term accomplishments. Will there be any replacement? Will there be any alternative vision? So let's see what she actually, as Abby said, can she move the issues that she's been identifying?
Also signed on to a health care compromise, didn't end up passing. With the Freedom Caucus, it would have stripped mandatory maternity benefits.
Yes.
As a federal requirement.
Family leave, child care. These issues are still pretty stalled. And on climate change, the president has actually completely rolled back things on climate change. So there's not a whole lot of evidence that it's moving in any particular direction as a result.
And you have a power couple now in the West Wing. And as you mentioned, they're close to the president. He has their trust. But if you look at Jared Kushner, who's Ivanka Trump's husband, he's senior advisor to the president. He's under question. He's going to be a question for that Senate committee for meetings with powerful Russians. He leads a new innovation council, which has become sort of an economic clearinghouse inside the White House. And he's a key broker among the competing presidential advisors you just mentioned. Now you have his wife over in the West Wing as well, spearheads those women's issues. We'll see whether she can actually get to move the ball forward. She has been in touch with some members of Congress about child care. We'll see what happens. As you mentioned, she's had some high-profile meetings with foreign dignitaries. And she has been in the campaign. We saw this many times where people would say, who's going to try to get him off Twitter for a little time? Who's going to try to change some of the habits that weren't helping as a candidate? She was effective then. What does she do? Is she first daughter? Is she quasi-first lady? Is she quasi-deputy chief of staff? Is she all of those things?
I think part of this is Trump is Trump. She will have influence when she does and then not when she doesn't. But I think she's the most likely to have some influence in these ways. The other thing, too, is that I think, she's more bulletproof than Jared is. Jared has had this meeting with the Russian banker, which looks among the more shady of the meetings that we've seen. And people like her. And it's going to be hard to get people to concentrate fire on Ivanka Trump versus other members of this administration. So she has some power in that respect as well, because it's just not going to be the PR issue. But I do think in general, the Trump family has problems separating business from what they're doing in government, because they've never had to do this before. It is who their family is.
Right, even just the other night, she came back, they were away. There was some talk that the president was mad at Jared because he was away in the middle of all the healthcare stuff. They take their kids on an annual spring break. And as soon as they got back, Ivanka Trump and President Trump went where for dinner? The Trump Hotel. Right. This is part
incredible percentage of the time he has been as a Trump property as president.
But you hear all the time about these splits in the White House, and it is having Ivanka and Jared there, and Gary Cohn from Wall Street. You have all these conversations about there's a New York cabal, and then there's Steve Bannon, who's more of a disruptive force, and there's the establishment force. He likes it this way, the president. At least he did during the campaign. But is there evidence that it's causing dysfunction in terms of you can have a good debate of ideas, and then make a decision and implement it, or you can have a good debate of ideas, the president makes a decision, and the people come out on the losing side then run around trying to undermine it? What do we see?
I mean, I think we're seeing that the divisions are real, and they're there. There are clearly two camps of people who are allied in different ways, but the only thing that you can judge the consequences of that on are the outcome, the output of this administration. And so far, the entirety of the output is in the Bannon, or even the alliance, the sort of alliance between Bannon and Priebus. The output is all over there, and it's not over on the, Jared Kushner, Ivanka, Gary Cohen side. So we're 70 days in. We have a long way to go.
Is the timing have anything to do with the fact that the outcome has not been terribly successful in terms of getting stuff to the finish line? They've done some executive stuff, and I think we underestimate the power through which they can change the government, whether it's the clean air thing you mentioned, when they get to the Dodd-Frank rules. Maybe we're going to see them now try to undermine Obamacare through executive action. I think we underestimate sometimes what they can do with executive and administrative power. But legislatively, a lot of roadblocks.
What you hear on the Hill is less about divisions and stalemate than lack of firepower in the first place, and lack of detail, lack of program. What is the president said we're going to have a great tax plan. Okay. Great. And on health care, there really was no clear guidepost. They got kind of buffeted around by the internal House negotiations, kind of lurching to the right at the end by repealing those essential benefits. And so I think the bigger question is not so much are there factions that are fighting with each other, but is there just enough there? There are a lot of vacant jobs to produce the detail that you need to actually legislate.
This is what's been the most interesting to me for a candidate who was the most aggressive candidate throughout the campaign, both in the primaries and the general election. This has been an incredibly passive president. Right? It's like the forces are sort of buffeting him around. Oh, well, we can't get the Freedom Caucus. Oh, we have all these internal debates about which way we should go on these issues. You have not seen that president come out and say, this is who I am, this is my governing philosophy, this is what we're going to do. And so we're either going to continue to watch this, or at some point he stands up and says, forget it. We're going to focus on this thing.
In this town, sometimes wanting a deal, even wanting it really badly, which is what Trump wants, versus the deal means you get no deal.
I mean, he's a not ideological president leading a very ideological party. That's always going to produce some problems. I mean, Trump could be himself, but he can't force the Republican Party in Congress to
not
be
ideological, but not moderate.
Not
moderate.
Not moderate. We shall see. And we're learning he can't force them to go his way, at least not yet. Up next, the adults took stage today, the Senate Intelligence Committee getting its turn to hold the Russia hearing, but the bickering in the House Intelligence Committee over Russia, well, still spilling over very much into public view.